That's the PSR. That's the PSR balcony. Oh, after I finish my lecture, then you'll tell me that, okay? Should I begin? Yeah. Okay, great. I'll be back. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining me today. This lecture is the first of a three-part series. The class is called Revelation Remix. What does this book tell us about the end of the world? I think that's the title, but you all may know it better if you have the material in front of you. Today we're going to talk about Revelation and Empire, and this is the first session, and after this we meet once a month in May, June, and July, and this is part of your continuing education units. Some of you may not need the continuing education units, but may be just interested in this topic, and so please come join us. The next three sessions will also focus on the book of Revelation, but it will be Revelation with a particular theme. So May will be Revelation and women, June will be Revelation and climate change, and July will be Revelation and your projects, right? So that's pretty much what's going to happen. Today I want to talk a little bit about Revelation against the empire, unmasking power and oppression. So if I can get the first slide. When it comes to the Roman Empire's influence, Adam Wynne writes that though Christianity was birthed under the power of empire, and every page of Christian history was written under its shadow, the Roman Empire has played a very insignificant role when it comes to New Testament scholarship. New Testament scholars rarely use the empire as a backdrop. And so, but as Wynne points out, Rome was not just a government, it was an empire. It controlled religion, economy, architecture, and daily life. So therefore, when we read New Testament texts, all of the New Testament texts, including the letters of Paul, it is very important to recognize that they are written under the Roman rule. And yet, for the longest time, scholars have treated the Roman Empire as part of a background noise. In fact, as John Dominic Crossan reminds us, Roman imperial theology was in fact the glue that held Roman civilization together. And therefore, it is important when we especially read Revelation, we read Revelation as a text that is written under the shadow of empire. The next slide, please. So why was empire overlooked? Western scholars often assumed that religion and politics should be separate, just like the church and state today. But those of you who are in the church know that it's not that easy. In the Roman world, this divide did not exist. And also, most of the scholars who wrote on Revelation came from places of privilege. Most of them were men, and most of them were from the European context. So therefore, they were not seeing these texts as a text that were written in subversive ways. And when you're on the top, it's hard to see the world from the bottom. Next slide, please. So therefore, there's a shift that starts to happen, especially when postmodern and post-colonial scholars come in and begin to read the New Testament texts. They began to recognize that early Christians were not just early Christians, and I'll say Christians in quotation because at this point there are no Christians yet, they're Jewish people, but these people are colonized and oppressed. And they begin to ask the question, if you are colonized and oppressed, how do you then respond to empire? And that changed in the past 30 years. Postmodern and post-colonial thinkers like Homi Bhabha and James C. Scott helped scholars see their own biases. Suddenly, New Testament authors were not privileged theologians, but people from contexts that were oppressed, that were speaking into the empire. And this began to raise the question, what if these texts were not submissive, but subversive? The next slide, please. So, Christian responses to empire are varied. You have responses where people are openly subversive. You also have responses where people are accommodative. They are sort of not sure where they are with the empire. They're resisting, but not quite as openly. So there's a complexity in the way these authors are responding to empire. Some will resist, some will accommodate, some will do both. The beauty is that the New Testament does not offer one set of answers. In fact, the way you look at it is that it offers us strategies, diverse set of strategies. It also tells us the reality that resistance sometimes may not always be the right answer. Sometimes accommodation, sometimes hybridity, sometimes implicitly being resistant. Next slide. So, one of the ways that resistance takes place in the ancient world is through coded and co-opted languages. As many of you know over here, the New Testament is written in what language? Koine Greek, right? And who was the one who spoke Greek and Latin during that time? It was the empire. So when you're writing in the language of the empire, how do you resist empire? You resist by taking the language of the empire and playing with it, coding it, co-opting it, and pushing back against the empire. Christians used Rome's own language against it. You know, words like the gospel, evangelion, Lord, Son of God, Savior, peace, justice, these were all words in which they were resisting empire. It was also a way to subtly challenge Caesar's authority. Early Christians also borrowed Rome's own language, and they used these language for Jesus. So you all of a sudden you start seeing, you know, when they're saying, Jesus, Son of God, guess who had that title? Caesar, right? And so then you take that title and you go and give it to someone who was crucified. Oh, there's a big thing. There's something happening there, right? So it is not subtle. It's bold. The next slide. Hidden transcripts. I think I missed a slide. Yeah, there we go. Hidden transcript. James C. Scott, and I use his work a lot. If any of you are interested, please do get his work. It's called Domination and the Arts of Resistance. James C. Scott calls this language hidden transcripts, it is transcripts that are publicly expressed, but only the people who are oppressed are understanding what is happening. Publicly, the oppressed may seem submissive, but in private, they're telling stories that challenge power, and Revelation is one of those books that is full of hidden transcripts, because it's not just full of monsters, judgment, and hope, it's also full of coded language. The Malay term for gossip and rumor, called kabar angin, news on the wind, captures the diffused quality of responsibility that makes such aggression possible. The character of gossip that distinguishes it from rumor is that gossip contains typically stories that are designated to ruin the reputation of some identifiable person or persons. If perpetrators remain anonymous, the victim is clearly specified. So think back to the Gospel of Mark, where the women go to the tomb and they run away, and there's a whole lot of thing about what was happening. Was he really risen or not? And it's often given, you'll see many New Testament scholars talk about it as gossip, right? And so if it is gossip, really think about rather than dismissing the gossip, think about gossip as a subversive way in which this rumor or the story is taking hold within the community, the early Christian community. Most gossip is a discourse about social rules that have been violated. A person's reputation can be damaged by stories about his tight-fistedness, his insulting words, his cheating, or his clothing, only if the public among whom such tales have circulated have shared standards of generosity, polite speech, honesty, and appropriate dress. I just want to tell you a story. In India, we have the caste system, and there was this really rich family that belonged to an upper caste and had many lower caste people who worked in their fields, and many of them, the lower caste people, were not allowed to use the name of the upper caste person, right? So they always had to call them Mr. or Mistress or Lord or master, that kind of word. And one day when the kids were walking through, the upper caste kids were walking through the field, they saw a lot of the lower caste people just shout out names of their moms and dads and grandparents, and they're wondering, who are they shouting at? And then they went close and saw that what the lower caste people had done was they had named all the cattle with the upper caste names. And so they would shout at them, and they would use their names when they were away from the house. So think about how resistance is always around us and how it's happening even in the small moments, right? Because resistance is about helping people, oppressed communities, recognize that they're alive and they have agency. The next slide. These are 2 coins, so I want you to look at these coins. One of them is Vespasian's between 69 and 79 AD. And on the other side, on this side, you see, is the image of Vespasian, holding a scepter, and there's a woman who's sitting there and crying, and that represents Judah, Israel, right? And this is during the time when Vespasian went in and captured the temple. And then these coins were created. And so now if you have to buy groceries, think about what that says about Jewish people. If you have to buy your groceries, if you have to exchange, you're using symbols of your defeat to feed yourself. So why would we not expect people to be not just hating the empire, but finding ways to co-opt the language and resist? So this is part of imperial theology, as John Dominic Crossan talks about. The next slide. So resistance through communities. The New Testament also models resistance through community life. When Paul tells people to honor the lowly, share meals without expecting payback, or challenges the paterfamilias model of power, he is also giving people a radically different society, one that undermines Rome's social control. The most powerful prediction of the destruction of Roman power is found in Revelation. But Revelation often goes beyond than simply predicting the destruction of Rome, and it vividly imagines what this describing of this destruction looks like. And in many cases, it's very problematic in the way it's describing Rome. Of course, it's widely recognized that Babylon is a coded reference to Rome, which, like Rome, had destroyed the Jewish temple. The next slide. I want to talk a little bit about accommodation. While you had resistance and open resistance happening, you also had people who were accommodating, and not everything was resistance. Some texts submit to Rome. Paul, or maybe even a later writer, says to obey the state in Romans 13. The writer of Ephesians tells wives to submit and slaves to obey. Are these texts capitulating, or are they mimicking? And can accommodation also be seen as resistance? The last slide. I want to introduce hybridity to you all. Hybridity is a concept that comes out in Homi Bhabha's work, The Location of Culture. It is a very dense text, but if you have it in you, please take a look at it. It's very, very helpful. Bhabha's idea of hybridity is helpful because he talks about how colonized people often imitate the empire, but not perfectly. In the book of Revelation, and if you read the way John of Patmos creates this empire of God, it eerily looks like a duplication of Rome, right? And the reason he does that is because he himself would be considered a hybrid subject, that in the midst of resisting Rome, he also mimics it. In the midst of mocking Rome, he also mimics Rome. They tweak, bend, and reinterpret. But what does this obedience look like? And could it actually be just obedience or accommodation, hybridity, or also subtle resistance? And then my final slide. I was supposed to show you a short video, but I don't have time for that. So it's a great video by Trevor Noah. Anybody seen him? It's wonderful. He talks about going to an Indian restaurant and ordering Indian food. I don't know if you'll have seen that clip. And there's an Indian guy who comes in and talks with an Irish accent, and it completely throws him off. And it's a great way to understand hybridity, that just because you look a certain way doesn't mean you're always from that certain place, right? And how hybridity allows you to belong to multiple contexts at the same time, and at the same time belong to neither of the contexts. And that's the beauty and the curse of hybridity. So what's the takeaway? The New Testament doesn't ignore empire. It's full of empire talk. But the responses vary. Some are defiant, some blend in, some imitate, some subvert. Understanding these responses will help us read the Bible not just as a spiritual book, the Bible as a political book as well. So that's my first lecture. Any questions before I move to the second one on empire? Or comments? Uh-huh.
So it was a lot of really good information.
Yes, and it went through very fast. I apologize.
My question is, would these slides be available to us? I would like to actually move forward with this, and it would be nice to be able to have these in a month when we move to the next section.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you will have it. I will put it up on, I think this is getting recorded, right, Jim? Yes, it is getting recorded. So I'll put the recording up, and I will put the slides up, and I will also put all the people I referenced in the slide as well.
All right, outstanding. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Are you going to address the Lord's Prayer in the context of empire?
No, because we're talking about Revelation, but I could when I do the other sessions, of course, okay. Yes. Again, the reason I would not right now is because Revelation responds to empire very differently than the Gospels do. And that's very important to keep in mind, that, the Gospels are not as antagonistic with empire as John of Patmos is, And so, therefore, you will see in the Gospels that they're not completely opposed to empire, but they're also not antagonistic towards empire the way John of Patmos is.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a very, very long question. Again,
what was the question?
When was the book of Revelation written? It's all over the place. Some dated near the death of Nero, and having to do with the idea that Nero, because many people believe that Nero was not, would come back from the dead, and so they believe that the Antichrist is Nero, and so they would place it close to that. Many place it after the Gospels, and after Paul as well. Paul is much earlier than the gospel, so probably around 110, 110 AD. But again, it's all over the place. Scholars don't have there's no consensus about it. Yeah, and the dating is the way they date it. Do you all know how they date it? They look at the beast, right? And so he says, and the first beast came, and it had a mark, and then and so they think that John of Patmos, when he's talking about the beast, is actually talking about the emperors of Rome, and that's how they date that. Yeah. Good. Other questions? Okay. All right. Oh, yes.
Will you address John's love of certain numbers and number schemes in conveying his point about what's real and what's not, and what's to stay and what's to go?
In the session, no, but I would actually point you to sources that talk about that. Particularly, and the way I would address that, if you were to talk to me about John's use of numbers, is I would address it through the use of coded language, because he is using coded language. Again, why? He is writing under empire, and he has to, it's the hidden transcript. He has to hide under the empire, and that's how he's going to do it. What John is doing is not new. Jewish writers wrote in those ways, and these were very often that they wrote in using numbers and codes. Another one who does that is also Matthew, genealogy. Notice how his genealogy has these patterns. He likes numbers too, of like 13 generations. Yes, 14, sorry, not 13, 14 generations that he has. Yes. Okay, can we move to the next one? All right, this is going to be far better than the first one because it's going to be more interactive. So this presentation actually comes from an article that I wrote under the same title, One Nation Under God, Teaching Biblical Studies in the Era of Religious Nationalism. And what I'm hoping to do today is, now that we have empire, we've figured out how empire works in Revelation, we'll talk about how an imperial, post-colonial, and a lens around religious nationalism helps us see what John is doing, and how John's words can be co-opted by those who are interested in a kind of a Christian nationalism rhetoric, and they can take those words and really use it to harm people. So the first, I think you all have Bibles near you, so if somebody would be willing to read for me Revelation 7, 9 through 17. Can I get a volunteer? Yes.
Do you have a preference of version?
Nope. Revelation 7, 9 through 17. This is the one of the great multitude. Yeah, the great multitude.
I looked again. I saw a huge crowd, too huge to count. Everyone was there, all nations and tribes, all races and languages, and they were standing, dressed in white robes and waving palm branches, standing before the throne and the Lamb and heartily singing, "Salvation to God on his throne, salvation to the Lamb." All who were standing around the throne, angels, elders, animals, fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, singing, "Oh yes, the blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving, the honor and power and strength to our God forever and ever and ever. Oh, yes." Just then, one of the elders addressed me. "Who are these dressed in white robes, and where did they come from?" Taken aback, I said, "Oh, sir, I have no idea, but you must know." Then he told me, "These are those who come from the great tribulation, and they've washed their robes, scrubbed them clean in the blood of the Lamb. That's why they're standing before God's throne. They serve him day and night in his temple. The one on the throne will pitch his tent for them. No more hunger, no more thirst, no more scorching heat. The Lamb on the throne will shepherd them, will lead them to spring waters of life, and God will wipe away every last tear from their eyes."
Thank you. What stands out for you in this Beautiful imagery of the great multitude in white robes. Is there a phrase? Is there an image? What do we think? Yes? Palm Sunday, yes. Go ahead, sir.
Words that strike me are from every nation and all tribes and people.
People. Yes. And language. All means all. Yes. Yes. Really powerful imagery, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else that stands out? Say that again.
They've come out of the great ordeal.
They have come out of the great ordeal. It's a feel-good text, isn't it? Wouldn't you agree? Yeah.
I would say that when you say it feels good, it's something that I'm actually dealing with in my own, spiritual context right now, is that God is at the center. Is that God is at the center of everything.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And that Jesus is right there with God, and that as we as the people of God have to remember that, no matter what we go through.
No, yeah, and no matter what the people,
And no-
the tribe, the
right.
rich. Yes. Yeah. Keep going. Sorry, did I interrupt you? No, okay. You're fine. Okay, yeah.
The other thing I wanted to
Uh-huh.
lift up is that, these are they who have come out of the great ordeal. They washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For
Uh-huh.
this reason, they're in the presence of God, basically. For this reason, they are before the throne of God and worship Him day and night,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Now I want you to put your critical hat on. Okay, it's a feel-good text. Agreed? Let's put that to the side. It's a feel-good text. I'm just going to ruin it for you all. We just looked a lot about empire. What stands out for you? Yes.
It says these are those, or these are they, and so that means there are some that are not.
Yeah. It is inclusion, but is it all inclusion, or is there someone being left out? I don't know. Have you also paid attention to imperial language here? There's a throne. That's right. There's a throne. There's worshiping. There is all of this falling on the face, praising God. Now, we say it's good because it's got God in there. But this God, right? Yes, go ahead, ma'am. I think you want to take my stuff further. Go ahead.
Right, well, it does say every nation, all tribes, peoples, languages.
Yes.
So maybe it's not just some people from one place.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yes. Yes. Pastor Leslie?
So that they all came through the tribulation.
Yes.
So what is it? That the only people who are standing before the throne are the ones who have come through a tribulation.
Tribulation. Right.
So, yeah, so it's like you said, it may be all nations, but it's not everybody in every nation.
Maybe.
It's only those.
It's from every, it's not all from.
No, yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
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 Yeah. From.
Yeah.
Right. No.
So, but it's those who have come through what's striking me is coming through the tribulation.
Coming through the tribulation. There's something that has happened, and from all of these people that have come, it comes across as inclusion, and it's not wrong if you read it that way. It's not. But also pay attention to the imperial imagery here. There is a throne. There is all these people who are coming. Palm Sunday, as one of you all said, with the branches, they're crying out in a loud voice, right? Yes. Anybody else? I think some. Yes. Go ahead.
They fell on their faces before the throne.
Yeah.
It's complete allegiance.
Oh, come on. Say that loud and proud.
That's the people who have passed through the ordeal fall on their faces before the throne. That's a sign of complete fealty and allegiance.
Yeah.
most monarchs, celestial or otherwise, really dig that.
Yeah, who do you think? They totally dig that. Who do you think? Who do you think likes that kind of imagery? Yeah, yes, sir, and then, yeah.
And then that's followed in the next verse with all the titles of Caesar.
I'm liking you. All right. He did. Yes, go ahead.
I think this though begins setting up God in the place of Caesar. That salvation belongs to our God, who is seated on the throne.
Yes.
And Caesar is the one that claimed to be divine and claimed to be where salvation did come from.
So you can see what John of Patmos is doing. He's setting up an imagery. Of course, he's setting up an imagery that he knows, right? He's setting up an imagery in a language that he knows. And he's creating this imagery. It's not his fault, right? It's not his fault. He is being subversive. I want to make that very clear. He is being subversive. But the imagery he draws on are images of empire. And you cannot separate the two. Right? You cannot take the empire out of John of Patmos, because as much as he hates the empire, he also digs it, as you said, sir. Right? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Sophia.
You know, one of the things that we're taught in seminary is to recognize your audience. And so just as much as, like you say, he hates the empire and he digs the empire, it's that he knows that his audience, we're caught in that same loop.
Totally.
And so there are those that are there that have come through, there are others that may be still going through. Right? It's like it's not a once and done event that people come out of oppression. As we see, oppression has occurred over and over and over in history.
Yeah, and the context is key, because without the context, you will not be able to understand what is happening here. Very nicely said. So who is the multitude? And scholars have spent a lot of time trying to figure out who the multitude is. Christopher Smith argues that the multitude is the new church or the new Israel. And he bases this out of the tribes that are listed in verses 5 through 8. Richard Bachman links the 144,000, verses 4 through 8, with the great multitude, verses 9 through 17. And he wants to also see this as something connected to the new church, to the new Israel, this new group of people. As all of you have pointed out, they have come through a tribulation. This is the new empire. This is the new kingdom of God. And the beauty about this kingdom of God is that there will be no dry eye, because at the center is God. But in doing so, I want to argue that scholars who have seen this as transformed Israel, sometimes the new vision of the church, these scholars are not asking the question of empire. They're not asking or looking closely at the imperial and maybe exclusionary undertones in the text. Who belongs and who gets left out, and how do they belong? How do they belong? What power structures are at play? Was here. Next slide. You got to have some fun with Revelation. Come on now. It's not doom and gloom. So, they cried out in a loud voice. Right? Revelation 7 through 10. I want you to ponder on these questions. Whose voices are centered? Who is getting included? Who decides? And any other reactions that you have to this verse. What do you all think? All means all? All means some? Who's deciding? No wrong answers. I promise I will not grade you. Yeah, go ahead.
It says specifically, hello, it says specifically that all this honor and glory belongs to our God who is seated on the throne. And it is no longer Caesar who is seated on that throne, not for this group of people who are there. So it's not that they're creating a new language or new imagery even. They are appropriating language and imagery from the past possessor of it and now applying it to Jesus.
Yeah.
The same rules still apply. Honor and glory go to that one, the one to whom we bow down and give glory.
Yeah.
But it's not the same one any longer.
Okay, okay. What happens when you take language that is of empire and apply it to a new context? What do you think can happen? Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You'll get your security clearance lifted.
Right? Because that's what's happening, right? I agree with you 100%. He is applying this. This is not new imagery. This is going from Caesar to Jesus. But in the process of going from Caesar to Jesus, what still remains? Exactly.
What was that?
Power. Power remains. Are we deconstructing the power, or we're just transferring the power from the bad guy to the good guy? I don't know.
I think it's a new generation of God's power being displayed here. I point out there are 7 seals being opened, and if you list the actions of the 7 seals against the actions of the 7 days of creation, you'll know that on the 7th day, the big surprise showed up, us human beings, and this one, the big surprise is chapter 8.
Right behind you, Jim.
My fear in hearing that is, I think, something that is happening currently, which is creating kind of a dangerous view of Jesus that in Christian nationalism that is becoming oppressive.
You can see how the language, when we co-opt it without critically analyzing it, like you can see what starts to happen, right? Again, I love the book of Revelation because I am, I'm very a problematic human being. But I'm also really fascinated with what John of Patmos is doing, right? He is taking the language of the empire and he is creating something new with the hope that this new will be better. But in just the blanket transferring of that language, those power dynamics continue to remain. You're not deconstructing it. And that's the problem. Sir. And sir, can you move to the next slide? Yeah.
So wouldn't Rome and Jesus have a very different definition of power? When Rome says, we have the power, which means we can crush you and steal all your stuff. And Jesus says, I have power. Jesus does not intend to crush you and steal all your stuff.
No, but people who use Jesus and who are using that name would fall into that.
Correct. They would use Jesus with the definition of power from the Roman Empire.
Yep. Which is also what John of Patmos is doing. That's what I'm trying to say, right? But that's the danger, right? Because how do you know, how can you discriminate between those powers when those powers are just being applied without deconstructing the power? You have to deconstruct the definition of power. Exactly. John of Patmos is not doing that, though.
I think.
You feel me? Yes.
I think that this transference of power from Caesar to Jesus was an amazing flip, but the Christian nationalists are now making the same flip back to another but human figure.
Exactly.
So Patmos changed it from a human figure to a divine figure, now from a divine figure to a human
Exactly.
figure.
And part of the reason why they're able to do that flip is because John of Patmos, when he flipped, he didn't think this through. Because it's about Rome. He is playing into a worldview where the language that he's using is already has power inbuilt in the empire that he's seeing, right? Language has power, right? So when I use things like, when I use terms like man, woman, black, white, rich, poor, Christian, non-Christian, citizen, non-citizen, these binaries have power inbuilt. Right? Immigrant, citizen, right? These are inbuilt powers. So the idea is that when you apply language of the empire, you're also transferring that power. Even if you're trying to create a new imagery, that imagery is built on the foundations of the old. Back to accommodation, hybridity, co-opted, coded language. Right? Yes, Sophia, and then, yeah.
So isn't our understanding that we have been given power and authority not to do evil, but that but the power and authority that, if we believe it and operate in it, is for good. So what purpose is there in dismantling what power and authority is if we opt and work to just do good, understanding that bad is always going to be in existence, and empire on some level is always going to be in existence, but that we are the resistance.
Yes, but in the process of resistance, we also have to critically analyze how we're resisting and the language that we're using, if that language is inbuilt into that empire.
I got you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, two more, and then we'll move to the slide, because it's getting better.
So I come from a very conservative background and had to do a lot of deconstructing of that, and have only recently found Disciples Church. And I love how in this denomination we are encouraged to critically think and apply science, and I'm fascinated with what you're saying. All of that to say that I asked this question very sincerely. Do you believe that the Bible was inspired? So when you are talking about John writing this, is it him writing it and using this language, or is it God breathing through him using this language?
Oh boy. You're asking what I believe. Oh, you're going to answer that? Yeah, you answer it. We'll talk, yeah.
When we're speaking of the language, I should point out that this is a Hebrew Jewish mindset out of a very specific language structure.
Sure.
This whole chapter, like the rest of Revelation, is chock full of allusions and direct references and even quotations from Hebrew scriptures.
Exactly.
Predominantly the prophetic works against the enemies of the Jewish people.
Yeah, and I really want us to pay attention to that, because there is if you think about him, he's a Jewish man in exile who's writing in Greek, and so his Greek is really difficult to translate, because many scholars believe he is translating as he writes, so his Greek is not as polished, right? He's thinking in Hebrew and he's translating it and writing in Greek. Some of the Alan Callahan, New Testament scholar, calls it, he says, it's a ghettoized Greek, is the way he frames it. He's an African-American scholar. Yes, sir?
So I just wanted to offer up a quick point. So when you're talking about the language and the use of language and the use of imagery, one of the things that we deal with I do a lot of art, and one of the things you deal with in art is the baggage of symbolism. So if you put a clock in your artwork, you bring everything that everyone has ever experienced in the nature of a clock to that piece. And you can't control what they bring to that. So when he brings the imagery, and process of empire,
Sure.
then he brings every experience. So some people
Exactly.
look at that as the pomp and circumstance of that, but they also look at it of the oppression, the power, the pain, and the suffering that goes with that. So when you use that imagery and you use that baggage, you don't have any control over the
Yes.
experience of the person reading it.
Exactly. I agree 100% with you. He doesn't have control because he is using that language to create a certain imagery. But what happens is when we take his imagery and we start playing around with it and put things like he's talking about church, he's talking about New Israel, without recognizing that his imagery already comes from a context of empire, we fail to see how he unconsciously is duplicating empire. And the duplication of empire is problematic, even though we want to believe in our hearts of hearts that these are going to be the good guys. I just know he's going to be the good guy. He's not going to be like Caesar. But you're using the same language of Caesar to describe Jesus. That's a problem, right? To answer your question, ma'am, I read biblical texts as political texts. I read them as cultural texts. I believe that they're responding to a context of their time, and they are trying to find God in the midst of their community, in midst of the oppression, and midst of the injustice. So I do see God in there, but not in the way that God's coming down and helping them right, but them trying to make sense of the meaningless injustice that's happening to their communities. That's the way I would see it, right? Okay, I love this part. Language is nationalism. Language is nationalism forms a barrier called linguistic imperialism. Partha Chatterjee, who is, which slide am I on? 5, okay. Nationhood, says Partha Chatterjee and Stephen Gosby, is tied to language. Revelation is written in Greek, the language of the empire. Think about the US. English is a barrier to attain citizenship. You need to take the English test. If you're coming in here as a student to study in this country, you got to do the TOEFL, Test of English as a Foreign Language. When a group with more power enforces the use of its language on another group, it is attempting to make its culture dominant, says Brazilian thinker Paulo Freire. Nationhood is tied to language. All right, the next slide. They're wearing white robes and we're holding palm branches in their hand. Don't you love the second part, dude? It's so where Jesus is beating up Godzilla. My 6-year-old went nuts and he was like, "Who is that?" I said, "That's Jesus and Godzilla." The white robes are traditionally seen or read as baptism of purity. Let's look at it from a post-colonial lens. No, let's look at it from a religious national lens. They are all wearing white robes. What are they masking? Masking. What are they masking? What are they hiding? Impurity. Okay, keep going, getting warmer. Humanity, keep going. Identity. Individuality. Difference. White robes. Hidden. We always pay attention. Many scholars will read the white robes as baptismal as purity because that's what he says. Right? People from all nations, all languages, all tribes coming together, singing in one voice. Linguistic nationalism? Wearing white robes, national dress? Could be. Y'all don't have to agree with me. Just hold on to it, and then y'all can let it go. Let's rethink the white robes. Do they symbolize unity or enforce uniformity? Are the multitude's differences being welcomed, or they are simply being hidden under a shared costume? What did Rome do when it went and conquered people? And I don't just mean Jewish people, because Rome was conquering other Gentiles. What do you think they did when they went into other territories? They enforced their ways, their religion, their culture, the way they worship, their dress code, their language. Interesting. Next slide. All right. If you all didn't know, I'm from India. Now you know. So when I was working on this essay, I really wanted to talk about nationalism. But I wanted to talk about the tropes of nationalism that are happening around the world. Very often we talk a lot in this country about Christian nationalism without seeing the tropes of nationalism that are happening around the world. Right? We have a tendency in the West to understand things in silos. And I always like to see connections. So I bring up Hindu nationalism, and I want to connect some of the tropes. In both Christian and Hindu nationalism, religious identity becomes a basis for citizenship. In both Christian and Hindu nationalism, there is suspicion of minorities. Here we are seeing it right now as we speak, with immigrants being deported, with student visas being revoked. In India, you see those suspicions of minorities, especially around Islamophobia, Muslims, and Christian minorities. There is an exclusion through policy and bureaucracy that happens in both, right? So these are some things. The religious symbols come into the political space, right? All of a sudden, you know, when India elected its leader, you suddenly start seeing the prime minister openly worshiping in the Hindu temples. Till date, we've never seen that. Prime ministers in India would always celebrate all festivals because India was always seen as a secular nation. But Modi, when he came in, he gives precedent to Hinduism and Hindutva, right? So the Hindutva movement is not, pay attention to what I'm going to say, Hindutva is not Hinduism. Hindutva is the political form of Hinduism. Sounds familiar? Christian nationalism is not Christianity. Christian nationalism is this political form of Christianity, right? There is also a masculization of religion. And there is these divine destiny myths. We are the best. We are the oldest culture. You know, what is it? US, shining city on the hill, right? Shining. India, oh, we're the oldest. We were there before anybody else was there. Yeah, so those things. In both India and the US, the next slide, sir. In both India and the US, religious identity is wielded to define who truly belongs. It's about who belongs. Minorities are viewed with suspicion, policies enforce exclusion, religious symbols become political. Both contexts also recast sacred figures as masculine militant leaders. Many of you have seen some of these imagery. Some imagery is new. So definitely think about how we thought of Jesus. But within this religious nationalism, within this Christian nationalism, you get bodybuilder Jesus. You seen that? It's all about the pecs, baby. It is so much about that, right? And then you have Ram. Ram, who is considered to be of a figure in India. He is also, he is seen as the forefather of India in some ways. And when I was growing up in India, it was this softer Ram that you see, right? It was that, that was what I saw. That was the imagery of Ram. And then as this nationalism picked up, I started seeing like this Ram with pecs, and I didn't know what to do with that. I just don't know what to do with that. Yeah, he is. Like he's the masculine, because it's this masculinization of nation. We don't like the softer hero. We don't like the hero who climbed on a cross and died. We like the hero who broke the damn cross. But that's the masculinization of nations that starts to happen. You're seeing that? Within your own context. Yeah, he did break the cross, yeah. Takes Easter to a whole different level, right? Yeah, use that in your sermon. All right, the next slide. Oh, what? Oh, yes. So here are muscular nations. Sacred figures are reimagined, reimagined as warriors. So they are no longer just, softer images of nations. Ram and Jesus are reimagined. What's the beauty of the Ramayana is when you read it, the Ramayana is a story of a man who is a victim of his own suspicion and doubt. And that is the ideal man. The ideal man is someone who has the guts to say, I messed up. Within the Hindutva politics, that Ram completely disappears. This Ram does not apologize. Sound familiar? Look at how those tropes are connecting. Religion is linked with masculinity and state violence. Myths and memory are used to justify supremacy. Ram and Jesus are both remade as muscular national heroes, protectors and warriors. They are not just teachers of compassion. They are reframing, legitimizing state power, violence, and exclusion, all in the name of faith. Religious nationalism offers unity through exclusion. The myth of oneness is what is masking the real inequalities. And I found this imagery very interesting, especially if you pay attention to the Indian imagery over here with Modi, and that's Ram. You notice the size difference, right? So here you have the leader now who is much taller in stature of even God. And pay attention to Trump and Jesus. And notice how Trump is ahead and taller. Right? Not following Jesus, no. Not following Jesus. And Jesus, of course. Oh, there's no question about it. What was really fascinating is with the Trump and Ram slide, that was what was used in the previous, most recent election, where all of a sudden you started seeing ads going up of Modi being taller than Ram. And that was, at one point it would have even been seen as blasphemy, not in the current context. It's not seen as blasphemy because Modi is seen as someone who is sent by God. In one of the interviews he even said, I am not human. I feel I have been called by God to create a Hindu nation. Nope. Yes, next slide. Oh, anthems of allegiance. So this song, one of you said, they fall to their faces. Pay attention to that language in connection with that imagery. All the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures. They fell down on their faces before the throne and worshipped God. Fell down, buried their faces, buried their heads. Saying, Amen, praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor, the power and strength be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Homi Baba says national identity is performed through anthem and epic. This song of unity, is that just a song of unity or is it a pledge of allegiance? Us versus them, the boundaries getting solidified. Who belongs, who doesn't? If you belong, are you singing the song of praise? Are you in a white robe? Are you falling to your faces? Think about how the multitude sings together. Is it just a singing and honoring God, or is it a public act of loyalty? This is more than worship, don't you think? It's a kind of anthem. It's drawing lines between insiders and outsiders. Think also about the criticism. What happens when one refuses to participate in the singing of the anthem and resists? What happens when one, during the singing of the national anthem, takes a knee? How do we understand those acts? Is this about worship? Is it about allegiance? Next slide, sir. Deleuze and Guattari talk about language and facialization. They say, if the face is in fact Christ, in other words, your average, ordinary white man, then the first deviances, the first divergences are racial. yellow man, black men in the second or the third category. They must be Christianized. In other words, they must be facialized. Language is not just about communication. It becomes a way in which you get facialized. All of a sudden, when they start singing the hymn, their faces become clearer. Yeah? The face becomes a marker of conformity, says Deleuze and Guattari. In Revelation, the multitude gains face only when they speak the language of empire. In this case, empire of God, but still empire. Foucault says power is everywhere, diffused and embodied in discourse, knowledge, and regimes of truth. You cannot escape that this text has power embedded in it. People gain visibility and status, their faces, only when they conform to the dominant language and power structures. Otherwise, they remain voiceless and unseen. Think about how language functions in contexts. In India, you have multiple languages, and right now there's a big fight going on because the current dispensation wants to make Hindi, the language of the North, one of the main language. And people in the South are going, you can't do that, because if you do that, we don't know Hindi. And why should we be forced to learn the language of the North? What is that about? Is it just about language and communication? It is about identity. It's about facialization. If you speak English to me, I can facialize you. Depending on your accent, I can start categorizing you. It's not just about community. You become clearer to me when you speak in the language of the empire. Next slide. There is nostalgia in nationalism. In Revelation 7:5-8, he names all these tribes. Most of the scholars who do not use post-colonial theory will read this and say he is hearkening to the Hebrew text, he is hearkening back to the prophets, which is all what John of Patmos is doing. But he's also recreating nostalgia. He is recreating this haunting of the glorious past. And that is a very important part of creating a standard culture. Nations construct a glorious but selective past. Oh, it's so beautiful. No matter that there was slavery, no matter that women couldn't vote, oh, we love the glorious past. No matter that there was corruption and poverty, and there was no technology, and there were no vaccines. No matter that. But it was just so beautiful. If we could just go back to the past. Really? Revelation lists the tribes as to evoke the pre-colonial roots. John's vision leans into nostalgia. It's a longing for purity and origins. When it was just things were so much simpler. What are you really trying to say? You're trying to say you don't like what this new community has become because this new community has mixed with empire and now it's hybrid. I just want to make things purer. Go back to the way things were. It's to reinforce a sense of belonging, but nostalgia often works to exclude those who don't fit the mythic past. Slide 13. The next one. Oh, this is an exercise. So y'all have I think y'all have blank papers. So take a moment, read Revelation 7:9-17. I want you to choose a phrase. It could be a phrase, it could be a sentence. If you're unsure, there are some examples for you over there. And I want you to take a moment and translate it into a language of your choice that is authentic to you. It could be your first language, it could be a heritage language, it could be a sign language, it could be a gesture, it could be art, it could be melody. Take a moment and write on that piece of paper a phrase that resonates with you in the language, the symbol, the sign of your choice. So let's take about 5 minutes and do that. And if you don't have to write, if you don't want to write, y'all can also just think about it and just have it ready. I know, I did. There are Bibles there. There should be Bibles. There should be, yeah. I just assumed all of y'all carry one, just like I do. Y'all can talk to one another. Y'all don't have to be quiet. Yeah, you can write on your phone. Okay? Are people ready? Ready? All right. Those of you who want to stand, stand. If you want to sit, sit. But face one another and take a moment and to each other share the phrase that you wrote, but share it loudly. And let's do it at the count of 3. And I want you all to scream it out. Because what does the multitude look like when we're not speaking in the same language and when we're not wearing white robes that are covering our differences? Ready? Everybody ready? We're still working? Talk to me. We're still working? We're ready? We're ready? Pastor Leslie? You're ready? Okay, so turn to one another. Do not turn towards the throne. Turn to each other. Right? Ready? Loudly, proudly. 1, 2, 3. Ha. Oh, are y'all translating the entire text? Okay? All right? Y'all having too much fun. I want in. I want to know what happened. When y'all shared the phrase to one another in the language of your choice, what did you notice? How did that multitude, last slide, transform?
Because we pick different phrases and we're yelling it at the same time, we can't hear each other. And I think even if we had all picked the same phrase but wrote it differently. We still wouldn't hear each other because we're yelling at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Communication. Do we need? Yeah. Oh, sir, can you change to the next slide?
And it just showed how unique we all are.
Unique we all are, yes, yes. And did y'all notice that when y'all are yelling at each other, y'all can't hear, so one of y'all slowed down and said, okay, you go first. Did y'all do that? Did that dance happen? Jim, here. Jim, here.
It made me think of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, the Tower of Babel. Isn't that great? Yes.
I forget where it is, but in Acts.
Acts, the speaking of the different tongues.
Was that chapter 2?
Yes. 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 The chorus, the multitude, the multitude gets facialized, but the facialization doesn't believe in uniformity. The facialization believes in, is more of a dance of, how do I hear you in this language you have chosen, which is not uniform, which is a language or a phrase of your choice, right? Thoughts, questions, observations. That's all I have today. Yes.
What struck me in this last exercise, which we didn't really have time to hear everybody, but was that the part that the words that I landed on were that the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. It's that they were just going to sit there and be taken care of forever. They had nothing more to do. Mm-hmm. All they had to do was sit there and be taken care of.
And how are they paying it forward, right? That imagery never shows up in John of Patmos's Revelation. Yep. Anything else? Context is key. Yes.
Context is key. Context is everything.
Yeah. Other thoughts or observations? Has anybody read Revelation 7, 9 through 17? You're going to read it very differently now. Yes. Yeah. Because it really breaks this idea of inclusion and belonging. Because this inclusion and belonging is through a particular lens. It is, I agree with you, Pastor Leslie. When you all scream at one another, you all can't hear each other. And yet there is this chaos, this babble of language that is happening, this communication, this laughter, right? It's no longer the anthem, the Pledge of Allegiance, right? It's the allegiance to humanity. It's the allegiance to be facialized in the language of your choice, not the language of the choice of the empire. Oh, I think that's it. Questions, comments about the session, the CEU? Monica is right here, Jim is here. Anything that we can answer?
If someone missed signing in, let me know.
Three. Jim. That's a Jim question. I asked Jim to be here.
Okay, make sure that your name gets on the roster here. I'll send an email to everybody with a link that'll help you get started.
And we're meeting, I think, every third Wednesday. There are dates. How do I connect to the internet here? Yeah, yes, we'll be meeting through Zoom. CC, DOC? FCC. Yeah. I can tell you the dates. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Okay.
So the question was, what time of day was it going to be? And that, I don't think it's been decided yet, but when I send a follow-up email to every one of you, I will give you the complete schedule of where and when and all that.
Mine is, I'll tell you what time is it.
Right. We have an answer.
Yeah. Just give me a minute. That's here. Sorry.
Jill is collecting the surveys, the evaluations. If you're done.
Okay, here are the dates for the sessions. The first one will be Wednesday, May 14th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. over Zoom, and we'll give you the Zoom link. June will be June 18th from 7 to 8:30. We will not have a Zoom meeting in July. Instead, we will have the last one on July 30th, same 7 to 8:30 over Zoom.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think for now, if you all remember the May and you all register, I will send you reminders of when the next one is. Does that make sense? So May 14th. And we'll send you the Zoom link as well. Yep, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Any other questions? Registering question is Jim question. Jim and Monica.